Welcome to today's presentation on Everpure carbonless filters for ice makers. The why for developing this product is bacterial growth and Legionella growth in ice makers. And the purpose for this development is the ASHRAE Standard 188. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And this is a standard for protecting water systems from bacterial growth and contamination. This is not law, but this is a standard that more and more healthcare facilities are adopting to help protect them from liability issues due to exposures of their water systems to bacterial growth, not only from the water supply, but from the environment. And then there's the how. How do these carbonless filters help manage bacterial growth and Legionella in ice makers? And then the what, the products that execute how we manage that situation. The why. The why. Ice makers' internal components are open to the air. This means they are exposed to airborne bacteria. The other thing is typical ice maker filters have activated carbon in them, and this removes the sanitizers, chlorine and chloramine, that are standard in municipal water supplies throughout the country. And this allows for bacteria that, if they're using a larger than submicron filter, or the airborne bacteria may grow in that environment inside the ice maker, and that hopper that holds the water, due to that airborne or waterborne exposure to bacteria, since we've removed the sanitizer that's killing that bacteria. So traditional ice filters remove that sanitizer using activated carbon. And you can see here in this picture, this is what can happen, is that growth can take place. You have algae and different bacteria growing here. And this is the sump that gets filled with water when the ice maker fills and refills to make ice. And this hose pumps it up to the evaporator plate, and then it's returned back to the hopper here. When that's a chlorine-free environment, you leave it exposed to potential growth. So, yikes, that stuff is kind of nasty. So, it's important to understand that water supplies are sanitary and not sterile. And the difference between sanitary and sterile, all biological life is wiped out. There is nothing living in that water if it's sterile. A sanitary system has biological life suppressed to the point where it should not do harm to a normal person. And that's where our water supply may be problematic for people in healthcare facilities who are ill, maybe immune compromised, or even just elderly, that they may not be able to fight off some of these common bacteria that may be found in our sanitary water supply. This can include places like bars and bakeries, healthcare facilities, hotels that have airborne bacteria and human contact with the ice bin that may introduce bacteria, yeast, and mold. So if you think about a bar, if your ice maker is near the garbage can or near the bar itself, the yeast from the beer may actually become airborne and enter into the bin in an ice maker. Bakeries, the yeast is constantly being put in the air from the baking process, which can lead to yeast growth within the bin. And then there's the simple human contact. Do they have good hygiene with opening that ice bin to get ice out of it? Is there a proper scoop? Is that scoop washed on a regular basis? Are they potentially using gloves to scoop ice out of that ice maker? And that big door on the front of an ice maker is also a big entry point for airborne bacteria into an ice maker. And that ice maker will eventually, that bin especially, will eventually produce biological growth if there isn't good preventative maintenance programs. There's a lot of poor preventative maintenance standards when it comes to ice makers. They don't get cleaned out until there's an issue. So I've worked in lots of bars and restaurants in my youth, and I only worked in one where we had a weekly protocol of emptying all the ice makers and sanitizing and cleaning them out. And that was more due to a liability issue of making sure there wasn't broken glass in them and it gets accidentally served than it was for really a cleanliness issue. So this is one of those things we need to advise our customers that they need to have a good preventative cleaning program for the bins, where we're going to be focusing with our filtration products on helping maintain the internals of the ice maker. That bin needs to be cleaned as well. So what is the ASHRAE Standard 188? It is a prevention of legionnosis associated with building water systems and outlines new standards that require a facilities manager to implement stronger safeguards against this bacteria, as it may be waterborne, but how it's communicable to individuals. It becomes an airborne aerosol from fountains or dispensed water, or in potentially in ice makers in the ice itself. How do we manage that issue? Conduct annual risk surveys of their buildings, including testing of their water system for Legionella and monitoring their water filter system so they're being changed out properly on time. Because a water filter that's left too long, bacteria can eventually exploit any filter and grow through it, regardless of how tight it is. And if a risk factor is found, that facility must provide an HCAP prevention plan. And this is a hazard analysis critical control point analysis. And this is a strategy that is implemented by the FDA, the USDA, and many other organizations concerned with analyzing risk factors for health-related issues. And this standard, even though it's not a legal standard, places responsibility for water safety on everyone associated with the design, the construction, the installation, ownership, operation, management of the building's water system. So this includes all the ice makers, all the air conditioners, cooling towers, things like that. And this is specifically about ice filters in healthcare facilities. Even though this is not law, this is one of those standards that exists that will get brought up potentially in litigation, whether or not a facility was aware of this standard and they are understood the implications of it. And it cites specifically that one risk factor is this, in the standard, is that incoming potable water, your tap water, contains less than a half a part per million of residual halogen, such as chlorine or chloramine. And a half a ppm is critical, 0.5, as that is the effective kill rate level for chlorine-based sanitizers to effectively suppress bacterial growth. That's why that is critical to have in the water supply to help maintain the internal cleanliness of ice makers. So the why. ASHRAE 188. Without municipal water chlorine disinfectant in the ice machine, healthcare facilities have a risk factor for Legionella disease. So if we've got carbon-based filters on our ice makers in healthcare facilities, that means we have a risk factor and we need to address it. And per that ASHRAE 188 standard, they will have to report this risk factor and provide an HCAP prevention plan to their management facilities people and most likely their liability management team. So the how. How does this technology address this issue? Well, first and foremost, we're going to talk about filtration. There are two types of technologies that we use commonly in food service, and those types of technologies are surface and screen filtration and depth filtration. Surface filtration provides a strict barrier where debris builds up on the outside surface, preventing things from migrating through. And only things that are smaller can get through that surface. And then there's depth filtration, which is a mat of material or web of material that has a depth where the particulate that we're trying to remove from the water, including the bacteria, gets trapped within the pores and the body of the structure of that filter material. And the material that we use in our filters for this application is a specially designed combination of both of those technologies. And one of the critical factors for designing ice maker filters to protect them from bacteria is to have a half-micron filter rating and have it NSF certified to standard 53 for cyst reduction. And what we have here is this wet molded structure that is molded around a center core of a half-micron rating. And you get this briar patch that will hold a tremendous amount of dirt load, but yet offer many paths through this material for the water to flow. And this will allow all different size particulate to be trapped within this nest of material before it reaches that core of the filter that's rated at a half-micron, preventing any bacteria from passing through in a nominal rating. And this slurry is vacuum molded of fibers around that core without any carbon. So it does not remove the sanitizer. So you have that sanitizer coming through at a very high flow rate to fill that hopper so that ice maker operates efficiently with very high dirt holding capability. And then the other feature of this filter is scale protection to protect the internals of the unit from scale buildup, which is a common occurrence in ice makers. And we use sodium hexametaphosphate. And this compound is known as a threshold treatment. And this is how it's mapped out in space. This molecule, by its stoichiometric chemistry, its direct mass-related exchange properties, would only be able to hold 6 calcium atoms in space. But in reality, this material can hold up to 26 different cations in space, metals, and things that form scale and suspend them in the water. And what happens, this is sort of how it works. Each one of these oxygens on this molecule has lone pairs of electrons floating in space that have its own partial negative charge. So it acts like a weak magnet holding a calcium atom between two of them. So that's how it works. It's sort of like static on the balloons on the cat here, where the red may be calcium, the yellow may be magnesium, and the orange may be iron. This molecule is able to hold all those things in space. And when it gets too concentrated, it will break apart into a calcium phosphate, magnesium phosphate, or iron phosphate molecule. And this results in a soft, mushy, sludgy scale that is easily flushed out of the ice maker when it dumps its hopper during the harvest cycle, preventing that scale buildup that's difficult to remove on the evaporator plate. This all ends up in the hopper, where it's easier to remove and easier to dissolve than traditional calcium carbonate or magnesium carbonate scale. This is how it protects it against scale buildup. So now the what? What products do this for you? Well, our filters use the Fiberdyne 2 media. This is that wet molded fiber structure that is a submicron filtration product that holds more dirt than traditional carbon blocks or even pre-coat filters without any carbon. And between the two technologies, we have two products, the 7SI and the 4SI. They offer a tremendous balance between dirt holding and volume of water it's able to treat. Both are half micron rating that meet the ASHRAE standard for providing a barrier to bacteria entering into the ice maker. That's step one, prevent the critters from getting into the ice maker. And the 7SI has capacity of 35,000 gallons per cartridge, and the 4SI has a capacity of 15,000 gallons per cartridge. And step two is the no carbon. That allows the sanitizer to pass through. The sanitizer, when it passes through and the ice maker makes ice, is pumped up into the ice maker and back down. And in the freezing process, the chlorine sanitizer is rejected by the freezing of the water, so it stays in the liquid water, gets returned back to the hopper where it's concentrated. And as we concentrate that chlorine, we're going to develop a higher and higher level of sanitizer, helping suppress bacterial growth. A, we blocked it from the water supply with a half micron filter, and B, we are helping keep it clean by providing a sanitizer. This will not cure an existing bacteria or mold issue. The ice maker will have to be thoroughly cleaned. This will help prevent future issues from happening. So the 4SI cartridge is NSF 53 certified. It's a half micron rated filter. It has phosphate scale protection and no carbon. No carbon is critical to helping meet ASHRAE standards. It has a very high flow rate for a small filter package. This is a 2 gallon per minute flow rate. This will handle a lot of ice makers up to very large sizes, and we'll go through that here in a minute. And a 15,000 gallon capacity. So on many small ice makers, this is going to be a 1-year change out or more. And the 7SI, essentially the big brother of the 4SI, is also NSF 53 certified for cystic bacteria reduction, a 0.5 micron rated filter, that same phosphate scale protection matched to its gallon capacity with no carbon once again. And this is a 3.5 gallon per minute flow rate and a 25,000 gallon capacity. So this one filter could actually treat multiple ice makers, small ice makers within a room. Let's say if there's 2 ice makers in a small room. So wonderful features, high flow rate, high dirt holding capability, no carbon. So we also have these available in different system packages already pre-assembled to meet just about every need for helping keeping ice makers clean. We have them available with pre-filters if you're dealing with a high dirt load facility or an older building that has a lot of debris built up in the plumbing, as may happen with some older facilities. So we have them available in just about every configuration, up to even quad systems for very, very large ice makers, very large commercial units as well. So these are applicable not just for healthcare facilities, but let's say a large-scale bakery, a large-scale meat packing plant, or a fish house or something along those lines, where keeping an ice maker sanitary might be very beneficial. All sorts of products pre-packaged, some with pre-filtration, some without. I'm a big fan of pre-filters because it helps these more expensive filters last even longer if you're dealing with high volume situations. So we have a system for just about every ice maker. If you have a facility that has multiple ice makers or tight service conditions for higher flow applications, please contact technical service at that 800 number below, and we have manifolds available that we could pair with multiple combinations of the 4SI filters to fit in the tighter spaces, under counter, back of house, wherever space may be limited, we can accommodate larger flows with tighter and smaller packages if needs be. We have listed by cubers. These are your standard ice makers. Hoshizaki is a very high flow ice maker, typically between 5 and 8 gallons per minute. So this requires special sizing and to match their flow rates. And then flake ice makers, which make ice by quickly freezing ice along a cylinder and scraping and flaking it off that cylinder. And they are much lower flow, so they can go for very high volume applications with a smaller filter combination. So up to 1,200 pounds a day for the cubers, up to 650 pounds a day for Hoshizaki, up to 3,500 pounds a day for a flaker for the ASHRAE PF single pre-filter. And this chart will match up to just about any application you can find in the field, up to 100,000 gallons, up to 5,000 gallons, up to 5,000 pounds a day in flake ice, up to 2,400 pounds a day and up for cubed, and up to 1,500 pounds of ice and up for Hoshizaki. And changeouts will be dependent upon how much ice they make during a day and where their changeout schedule will be. And we typically size those for 6 months or once a year. With small ice makers, we're looking at once a year with these filters. So it's also economical as well. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Pentair's technical service at servicespecialist@pentair.com, or call that 1-800 number and ask them directly your questions, whether it comes to sizing for a specific ice maker or researching water quality for a specific location. They will be happy to help you out in that regard. Thank you very much for attending today's presentation, and please let us know if you have any questions.